Africa Prime, brought to you by Jamison's Select Reserve.
Welcome to this special edition of Africa Prime. Tonight, we have Steve Forbes, the only writer to have won the highly prestigious Crystal Owl Award 4 times. The prize was formally presented to the financial journalist, whose economic focus for the coming year proved most accurate. Under his leadership, publishing empire Forbes Media launched a variety of new publications and businesses. These include Forbes Life, the dedicated luxury, lifestyle and culture magazine, Forbes Asia, and Forbes licensee editions covering most of Eastern Europe, Asia, the Middle East, and now Africa. Steve Forbes is chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media, and he joins me here on Africa Prime. Steve, welcome to South Africa. Welcome to Africa.
Good to be here.
Welcome to Africa Prime.
Thank you.
Today we had the Europeans, Angela Merkel, as well as the French President Sarkozy, finally taking the step that most have said seems to be appropriate in the circumstances, finally giving a roadmap of what needs to be done to get Europe sorted out. Is Europe done?
The answer, sadly, is no. Greece, there's no way Greece can continue to service those debts. There's simply too much. They will have to be restructured. And in terms of making sure the contagion doesn't spread, they have to make even more clear that the European Central Bank will buy in volume the bonds of Italy and Spain. Those two countries, that firewall should be fairly easy to build, but unfortunately the poor leadership from the Germans and the French have turned what should have been a minor crisis into a major one.
But can they afford to buy those bonds, which is one of the bigger questions that everybody has been asking, because apart from bailing out the banks, now if you're going to bail out sovereigns as well, I mean, you're assuming deep pockets.
You don't have to buy every bond on the street. For example, Italy's bonds, most of their bonds are long-term. You don't have to buy very many. Their budget is almost in balance when you take out interest payments. Spain, their debt is only 60% of GDP, so lower than that of the United States. They're dealing with their bad savings banks. They should move more quickly. So this crisis shouldn't be hard to resolve. And in terms of banks that are in trouble, either governments putting in a new capital, as we did in the United States 3 years ago, there are measures to contain the thing, but you have to be decisive and recognize Greece is a lost cause. Just make sure it doesn't spread elsewhere.
In your view, what went wrong with the European experiment?
The euro would be fine if they knew what central banking was about.
Right.
Don't print too many euros. For example, in the United States, let me just give you a hypothetical example.
Sure.
Let's say if Los Angeles defaulted on its debts. That doesn't mean the end of the US dollar.
Sure.
It doesn't mean Los Angeles has to get a new currency like the Los Angeles peso.
Yeah.
It just means that creditors take a hit. And that's what the Europeans have not recognized, is creditors are going to have to take a hit. That's the world. You made a loan, didn't work, too bad.
Are we heading into a global recession, given all the problems around Europe? Because Europe is part of the problem. The US, certainly, where you come from, is part of the problem as well.
Yes, Europe, what they're doing on the financial side has done enormous damage. U.S. has pursued some very destructive economic policy, so we're going at a subpar pace. But I don't think it'll be a formal recession.
Right.
It'll be like traveling on a superhighway, but going very slowly.
Okay, so slowly, but no recession. That's your call.
Yes. It'll feel like a recession because you should be going 100 when you're only going 10, but you're not going to halt.
Yeah. Now, we're going to talk about the fact that you previously ran for president here. But before we talk about that, let's talk about what needs to be done in the U.S. to get the U.S. economy at the right level rather than subpar, as you say.
Well, first and foremost, stop deliberately weakening the U.S. dollar. The dollar is the global currency, so make it strong and stable. And so I'll make a prediction. I believe in the next 5 years, if not sooner, the U.S. is going to do something we haven't seen since the early 1970s, and that is relink the dollar to gold. It has to happen.
Is that the solution?
That's the solution. But in the meantime, stop printing so many dollars, stop this zero interest rate policy, which Japan has tried for 20 years. It does not work.
Are you saying stop quantitative easing?
Yes.
That's what you're saying? Bernanke's got it wrong, you're essentially saying.
Well, the banks are full of liquidity,
yeah.
but you've, because of what you've done in destroying the interest rate structure in the U.S., it's made it very difficult for smaller businesses to get credit. The U.S. government, it's a subsidy for the U.S. government. Big companies, very easy to get credit. Smaller companies, very difficult. Japan has been doing this for 20 years. Why we think we'll do it better than the Japanese, I don't know. Another thing, in addition to stabilizing the dollar, is stop the binge spending, stop the blowout on massive government spending.
Right.
Again, it does not work. Now, other things that are particular to the United States, we've got to redo our health care system again.
Sure.
That was not done right the first time. But some very basic steps, and the U.S. economy would come back fairly quickly.
Is the political leadership there in the U.S. to get that right?
Not now, but I think after the 2012 elections, there will be a mandate there to stabilize the dollar, to reform our tax code, which is a horror, and some other measures, and then you'll be surprised how well the U.S. will do.
You are saying Barack Obama doesn't have the plan and he's not the man to get it right. So in other words, you're calling an end, if you like, to Barack Obama. First term, he's out.
Well, so far he's not pursued the right policies or had the right people. And you know, he's an admirer of Abraham Lincoln. And during our Civil War, when generals did not perform, Lincoln didn't hesitate to fire them. Mr. Obama's not done that yet to his economic team, like his Treasury Secretary, Mr. Geithner. So he's got time. His time is running out, but he still has time to do what Bill Clinton did in the mid-1990s when he was in political trouble, make some changes, and he could win a second term. You are on record as saying Rick Perry probably is going to make the Republican presidential nomination and probably beat Barack Obama. Do you still stand by that? I'll go out on a limb, yes. Is it a very, very long limb, or your chances are good? One of the nice things, it's a year out, so perhaps people will forget what I said here. Yeah, let's go back to Europe. Will the euro survive this crisis? The euro should survive the crisis. The currency? Yes. Again, it's like similar to a borrower defaulting. Doesn't mean the currency goes. It just means creditors, you got to deal with the mess that the crisis created. So in other words, you're saying part of the pain must come from the banks as well, apart from the sovereigns. Well, those who hold the Greek bonds have to take a hit. And the banks that are holding some other paper, they may have to stretch out payments. But you know, with Latin America, 20 years ago, Latin American debt was 3 times the capital of U.S. banks. And we dealt with it. The debt got restructured. Countries made reforms. Banks made reforms. We moved onward. Was not the end of the world. So what will it take then to sort out Europe in your view? Getting leadership that recognizes, 1, what is central banking, making the euro sound again. And 2, dealing specifically with Spain and Italy, which should not be hard to do, to contain the Greek contagion. Greece is hopeless. It's lost. They've made huge mistakes. Just make sure it doesn't infect the rest of the system. Sure. Is that leadership there now, do you think? I hope it evolves very quickly. that Merkel and Sarkozy and perhaps Cameron will wake up tomorrow morning and they'll have had a great dream about what central banking and economics is about. But the fact they all have elections coming up, certainly Sarkozy has one coming in 2012. Merkel has been losing on local elections. Cameron has a shaky coalition. That may focus their minds to realize what they've been doing has not worked. Okay, let's move away from Europe. Let's talk about China. Is China a force for good? China's economy, the growth of the economy, is a force for good. When you have more people becoming more prosperous, that's opportunities for everyone else. And so when the real push for growth in China are not these big state-owned companies, there are these literally millions, over 40 million small businesses started by entrepreneurs, seeing a need for a particular product. They do it. Then they move on to something else. That's where the growth comes from. It's over 2/3 of the economy. Now, in terms of the politics, in terms of their military spending, potential of doing mischief against Taiwan, that's where you need strong diplomacy. The fact that China is becoming an economic growth engine, we should applaud it. That means they want more things like minerals. Africa likes that. Absolutely. It's a very good story for Africa for sure. But in terms of dealing with China within the global economy, in your view, do you think
the right structures have been created around China to make sure China is properly integrated within the global economy. I mean, we have seen the trade imbalances that are going on between China and the US. We've also seen the huge quarrels around the Chinese currencies, etc. Are those being handled the right way?
So far, no.
No.
If
you were president, what would you have done?
Well, if a country wants to tie its currency to ours in the U.S., I'd applaud them.
Right.
Great, it makes trade easier. In fact, what China did 15 years ago when they tied the yuan to the dollar was they outsourced their monetary policy to our central bank. And we got upset about it. Right. I don't know why. We should focus on real issues with China, such as internal trade barriers, such as theft of intellectual property rights and the like. Focus on the real issues, not on this crazy currency thing.
That's not going anywhere.
It's a silly thing and destructive thing to focus on. Focus on real issues that make a difference in terms of trade.
So what does Barack Obama do to get it right, to make sure that China stays within the right strictures and as it grows, works within the system rather than destabilize the system?
Two things. One is rules of the game in terms of diplomacy. China cannot use force to resolve these disputes with its neighbor over islands, cannot use force to resolve Taiwan. That'll evolve over time.
Right.
And in terms of economics, remove trade barriers, stop the theft of copyrights from our software writers and the like, and we should have a very happy relationship.
Sure. Final question on this segment at least. What makes you unhappy about today's global economy?
That we don't have, we're not doing it right in terms of the currency stability, and we're not doing more to reduce trade barriers. Otherwise, I think it's great that countries are starting to try to rise up again. It's good for everything, everybody.
Yeah. One of your more controversial ideas has been around introducing a flat tax in the US. Do you still think that would hold in today's global economy with the kind of competitiveness that we're seeing creeping across our global economies, from China that we've been talking about now, India, we talk about Brazil, we talk about Russia?
I think a flat tax works wherever it's been tried. Single rate system with generous exemptions, allowances for adults and for children. 25 countries have done it in recent years. It's worked everywhere, including Russia. So I think the U.S. is going to have a debate on it next year. And my only advice to South Africa would be, do the flat tax. That would give a good boost to your economy. Your income tax rates are too high.
I'm going to cut this clip and I'll send it to the Finance Minister, Pravin Gordhan. Steve Forbes is our guest tonight here on Africa Prime. Please do stay with us. When we come back, we're going to be talking about his plans for Forbes Africa, which was, of course, launched last month.